Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Parenting is Easy, Said No One Ever. I am excited about our interviewee today because this is a topic that she is familiar with and one that she's written a book about and one that we have never covered yet here on the podcast. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Suzanne, who has been a book writer now, is a parent, and is a former actress and former Miss Arab USA. Now she's an author, and she is an author of a dark comedy memoir, Post-Partum Me. Hopefully no one pardons the pun as well in that, which is now also an Amazon bestseller. Her memoir is filled with all the dark and hard thoughts mothers, while experiencing postpartum depression, can have but are too scared or ashamed to say out loud. It's irreverent and funny, but most of all, it's a comfort to those dark moments. And I'm so happy to introduce Suzanne. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to talk to you.
So where did this start from? Obviously, I think it's easy to say where the inspiration behind the book came from, but walk us back to the concept of, hey, I'm in a certain spotlight, doing things a certain way, and then there's change from stopping what you were doing into now writing a book and sharing this, I think, such an important aspect of our lives as we're working on our own child rearing, and then where it goes from there into being a parent and how that affects us as well. Where did that all start from?
It started from not knowing that I had postpartum depression and experiencing a bit of a shock into motherhood. The way I usually explain it is, for me, correlation was causation. So I became depressed at the same time I became a mom, but I didn't know that I was depressed. So I just thought these are the feelings you have when you're a mother. This is terrible. Why are people doing this? And I couldn't understand the appeal. I wasn't bonding with my son. I was an actress, and then I had to stop acting. It was just, I couldn't really manage both. And especially after I had my second one, it was just way too hard. Everybody calls me Suze, the cool, creative, fun, passionate Suze. She just went away. And I was just this girl in this condo raising babies. And I was like, this is awful. This is so miserable. And I really liked who I was. And then that girl didn't exist anymore. My only identity was a mom. And I had, shame on me, I had kind of judged mothers. And if you were a mom, I was like, ew, gross. Like, I kind of dehumanized mothers in a way before becoming a mom. You're just like, you're not cool anymore and you don't get to do all this fun stuff. Like, you're not really your own person, et cetera.
You don't have a life.
Yeah. And somehow I got all those thoughts given to me, and then I percolated and formulated it unbeknownst to me. And then I pushed that out. I was sort of just didn't like that. So then when I became a mom, I was like, oh no, I'm all these things. How horrible.
Now, did that happen after the first pregnancy, or is that after your second one where this all started?
It was the first one. It was funny because during my process of writing the book is when I realized I actually started to have perinatal depression.
Can you explain to everyone what that is, please?
Yeah. So it's exactly like postpartum depression, except it's during your pregnancy. So at about 8 months, I got really, really depressed. And I didn't know, of course, but you're tired.
How old was your oldest at that time during that pregnancy?
No, this was with my first one.
With your first one. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's when the book writing started already during that time?
No. The book writing started way later, after my depression was over and I was healed.
Oh, wow.
Every time I tried to bring it up with people, I was getting really horrible responses. So I'd be like, I don't like my kid. And they were like, well, no, he's beautiful. Thank you. And then I'd be like, I need this to be a dream. I need to wake up. This cannot be my life. Oh my God. And I'd be like panicking. And then people would be like, no, thank God he's healthy. Thank God he's healthy. And I just kept getting, thank God he's healthy. And it was really, really dismissive of my feelings. It really invalidated. And it kind of made me feel like I was the bad or crazy person.
I was about to say that you're the crazy one, because like everyone's telling you something that you don't feel and you can't connect, not only to everyone, but also to your child.
Yeah, which makes you feel like a bad mother. And I'm like, where are my maternal instincts? Why don't I have them? What is wrong with me? I didn't think I was going to be the most maternal mother, but come on, I can't even love my child. So there was a lot of conflict and guilt and shame inside of me. And when I tried to express them, I got rebuffed. But this was before I was expressing it with like, hey, I have depression. So here's what I'm feeling.
Before even knowing what it was.
Mm-hmm. This was just, I'm a new mom and I'm telling you how I feel. It's not getting well received. So then I shut down and I stopped talking about it, because who's going to sit there and listen to a woman go, I don't like my kid? You're not supposed to say that.
Yeah. And more than that, I think also there's a certain message that you're trying to communicate and share with others, and it's not being received at all. So there you are being completely non-validated in how you're feeling. So it's like, okay, so why even go there anymore? Why even bring this up and talk to people? And that's got to be a horrible feeling.
It was really isolating. And then I just further isolated myself because that just felt like the right thing to do at the time. At this point, I have 2 kids. They're 2 and just born. So that's always really hard. And you could make an effort to try to like get yourself out there and seek help, or you could just isolate. I chose the latter. When I decided to write the book, it was because I was really mad. I was really mad that I felt like I was lied to about motherhood. I felt like I was lied to about the things that you can experience. And I felt like there wasn't a safe space to just say the really hard things that you were thinking. Even women who read the book that haven't experienced postpartum depression have had some of these thoughts. Sure. They're like, oh gosh, I kind of regret this. I mean, I love my baby, but this is crazy. But you can't say that. So I wanted to write it as sort of a comfort to be like, hey, I'm just going to get inside your head and kind of let you in. So it's written in the form of journal entries because I couldn't talk to people. Oh, wow.
When did you start writing it? At what point in your parenting experience did you start writing this?
They were 4 and 2.
They were 4 and 2. Mm-hmm. So you're already, and I'm not going to say a veteran, but you already have 4+ years of experience in the parenting thing. And there's something you said earlier, I want to go back into that as we continue this. So there was a certain part of you that became curious. Can you describe what I mean regarding like being curious and like, okay, what's going on? What are these feelings? What was that like happening to you? And how is that affecting your everyday parenting?
I don't even know if I would call it curiosity. It was just like sheer terror and new feelings. I had never been depressed before, so it didn't make sense that I would have depression now. The things that you tell yourself. So it was sheer terror, and it was like all this new information and these new feelings, and I didn't know how to handle it. And I'm just one of those people. One of the things I'm learning as a parent who's trying to not pass on like generational trauma and things like that to your kids, I learned that I just disassociate. That's my bread and butter. That's my superpower. And so I needed to just not deal.
That's your coping mechanism, sure.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah,
so
I'm very familiar with that coping mechanism.
Isn't that a good one? Let's just never talk about it again. It was just all these new feelings. And then when I tried, it wasn't well received. And a lot of it, I couldn't even formulate. Oh, here's the other thing. I can't always formulate your feelings into thoughts and then into words. So sometimes you're just having these really heavy, heavy, heavy feelings being depressed, and you really can't even begin to explain. On top of just your normal postpartum stuff, like being sleep deprived and all that.
Yeah, and not eating properly, house not being probably as pristine as you would like it to be, and all the other things that come with it. And those are all, in some ways, some people might call them microaggressions, but there are certain parts of us that we like having order, we like having a clean way of living, and we don't have that when we're taking care of our number one priority, which is our kids. And that really adds to overall feeling that we have. And that's even saying someone that doesn't have postpartum and not being able to have kids, but being able to experience it in my own household. And I think a lot of fathers can relate to that, for what's happening at home over here. And I think one of the reasons why I wanted to speak to you is because, well, I think there are correlations, but I don't think it's the same for a diagnosis for depression as we would give for postpartum depression. And I think there are many differences when it comes to what's happening inside. And if you're okay talking about it just a little bit for like, what was the feeling, whether it's the emotions or even the bodily feelings, and how is that showing itself? How is that manifesting itself in your everyday life?
There was the classic sign of depression. It's funny because I use Harry Potter as the example.
Ooh, love it. Yes.
Okay. All right. We can be buddies now. It's official. The Dementors, their job was to suck the joy out of you. They didn't kill you, but they essentially kill your soul. And that was J.K. Rowling's, Harry Potter's my favorite. I know a lot about it. That was her example of what depression looks like. It was her manifestation and her illustration of how depression can make you feel it's invisible, nobody can see it, and it just comes, and then suddenly you can't conjure one happy thought. As hard as you try, you only can feel bad things, and there's no good memories. That's why the counter curse to that is to think of something really happy, and because it's so impossible. So I likened it to that. The feeling of just the heaviness and the inability to ever feel like things are ever going to be better. That was like the really big classic one.
Sure. I love that example. And you're painting a perfect vision in my head. And just to sort of maybe explain it over here for our listeners, imagine a kid in the middle of the most amazing candy store / toy store in the world and had the biggest smile on their face. And then all of a sudden this little black cloud comes on top of them and just completely takes them over and makes it that there is no joy that's able to be had, even in the happiest place on earth, in the middle of Disneyland. And it's just not possible. That's sort of what I'm hearing, which obviously as a parent sounds horrible, but even just as a human, it's just hearing how it takes over everything. And then you lose your appetite, you lose your sense of being. And I think one of the things that I talk about, at least in my office as a psychotherapist, it's not just about sometimes getting rid of bad thoughts, but it's about putting something else in place. I refer to it as like the 3 Ps, where you pause, you push aside, and you replace. And it's only when you're able to replace, like you're saying, thinking happy thoughts, is when we're actually able to get to a place of battling and hopefully winning the battle of getting rid of that. Oh, yeah. Okay. So when a person is going through this and they're experiencing that black cloud, how can a woman get out of that feeling?
Well, first of all, I'd like to discuss the black cloud just very briefly. The cloud, which I actually do mention, and there's a line where I'm like, the thing about depression is, and then I explain this cloud. And the cloud just follows you around all day. Like, remember Pigpen from Charlie Brown?
Okay,
and he just like has this like stink cloud that kind of just follows him everywhere because he's so stinky.
Yeah.
So it's like that. So it's just like following you, and then it's kind of hanging out over here, and it's slowly filling up as your day goes on, as your week goes on, whatever. It's filling up with all this stuff. It's telling you all these horrible things, which, by the way, whoever's listening, if this is the one thing that you can take away, this line is my favorite line in the whole world. Your depression is lying to you.
Oh, yeah.
It's filling up this cloud with all these lies. Your life will never be the same. You'll never be as happy as you once were. Your kid took everything from you. You have no future. Everything sucks. All this stuff. And then something really small will happen. And again, my book is a comedy. So there's this like funny part where my father-in-law drank my juice and I lost it. Because in my head, that juice was like the only good thing going on in my life. And then my father-in-law drank the only good thing going on in my life. And I lost it. And that cloud burst. And my father-in-law and my husband were laughing because it was funny. It was an accident. He went and ordered it. Well, I ordered it. And he went to True Food to pick up this food. And he goes, oh my God, while you wait for the food, they give you a juice on the house. Isn't that so nice of them? And he comes home without the juice and he tells me the story and I'm like, you drank my juice. And so my father-in-law and my husband are laughing because they think it's funny. And sure, in hindsight, in the moment, I was like, nobody understands me. I am so alone. You don't understand how important this drink is. And it's so weird. If you haven't experienced that, this story makes me sound crazy. But it's actually like, it was such a good example of how, because you're so heavy, the smallest thing, when you give yourself the opportunity to find joy and then it just vanishes. Oh my God.
It's your life taken away from you. It's literally your life taken away
a little bit.
Yeah. And I think that can affect so many people in so many ways that for some reason, I don't know where the vision came from in my head, but as you're talking, I'm thinking of Russell Crowe movie, A Beautiful Mind, where he's a schizophrenic and he gets to a place where he has control over, I guess as an IFS therapist, I call them the other parts to him. And you could sort of see through the movie as he sort of battles with them where they're so on top of him or they take him over and they make him act in a certain way. But then there are certain parts where he has control and they're sort of just wandering off in the corner and they're away. They're there, but he has control over them in a certain way. So, sort of thinking about that cloud and depending on where that control is and where we are in our own lives, how far are those things going to be from us? And what's going to be that little pin that's going to go into that cloud that's going to make everything come down, whether it's a drink, whether it's going to be a red light or a green light, maybe when we want a red light. It could be so many different things that can set us to that place of just letting things go. So back to that point, how can a person sort of get out of that or make it that the cloud can hopefully one day dissipate completely, but at least maybe stay small?
Mm-hmm. So it's so funny because people will be like, okay, great. When I do my podcast, they're like, tell us what you did to get better. And I'm like, oh, no, you're misunderstanding me. This is a cautionary tale. This is a, please don't do what I did. So let me tell you what I did. I did not ask for help. I kept everything inside. Okay, so first of all, and I'm writing an article about this now, so this is kind of fun to talk about. You have to be really vulnerable to say that something's wrong. But before you can do that, you have to be really vulnerable with yourself. You have to actually stop, look at yourself in the mirror and go, I don't think I'm okay. And the reason that that's really hard, first of all, is because if you are a new mom and you do that correlation as causation and you think, well, this just must be what it feels like to be a mom. This is me desperately trying to tell everybody I can that you shouldn't feel that way. So there's baby blues and then there's postpartum depression. And if you are experiencing these feelings that I've been describing for the first 2 weeks, it's pretty standard. That's okay. But if it's 3 weeks, 4 weeks, a month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, a year, and you're still feeling this way, something is wrong. So you have to be able to acknowledge like the difference, that there is a difference, that this isn't what motherhood is supposed to feel like. And then you have to look at yourself in the mirror and you have to say, okay, something is wrong and I actually need to ask for help. And those are really hard things to do because if you are in a state of depression, it's really hard to have the thoughts like, okay, what can I do now? Like, what are active steps I can take? It's a big ask, which is why I'm so desperate to get people to hear this. So it's kind of just hanging out in the back of their minds for when they do need that. And then you have to ask for help, which is really hard. So the first person you have to talk to ideally would be your partner. I got to the point where I wasn't talking to my husband. And one time he asked me if I wanted to leave. He's like, do you want to just go? Clearly, Sammy's ruined your life. If you want to just pack up and like go for a year and do all the things that you think he has stopped you from doing, then just go. I mean, he might as well have punched me in the stomach. I just thought like, this is how you see me. This is how far gone I am that you actually think I would want to leave you guys. I couldn't see myself that way, but that's the perception that I was kind of putting out there. That's when I broke down and I was like,
can you talk about, so that moment you're having that conversation with your husband and he's saying it, and at least the way you're saying it now, he was saying it in a very caring way that, hey, this is what you need to do. Sucks, but I support it type thing. And there you are hearing it completely different than that. You're hearing it like, all right, where's the gun, so to speak? What's going through your body? Like, what are the emotions that are happening in you at that time?
I wanted to throw up. I wanted to throw up because I was appalled at myself that this is the representation of me that he sees. How could he even ask me that? Oh, because I spent a year going, I should have never done this. If I could change my mind, I would not have a kid. This was a mistake. So I spent a year doing that. So his conclusion in his head makes sense. But for me, I was just sitting here like a crazy, just like saying all these things, kind of erratic. And then I had the thought, kind of looked down the hall where Sammy was sleeping. And I thought, oh my God, like what if I walked up? Nope. And I couldn't even get myself to finish that thought.
Finish a sentence.
Wow. I couldn't even
I'm not hearing anything regarding like towards your husband, who in some ways you'd be like, who the hell are you to be telling me what I should be doing right now? And that's what you're going to recommend? Like, I'm not hearing any of that. Like, how is that something that is not coming up? Because as I'm hearing you say the story, I'll be like, wait, so you want your partner to leave for a year? Like sort of just get out of there?
Because I was so
Where does that come from?
I was so heartbroken that I had been this miserable for this long, and it made him so miserable that this was his only solution. That he was like, look, if you got to go, you got to go. Like you said, it's not ideal. I'll find somebody to hire to help raise the baby. But the fact that he thought that that's what I needed or wanted was just like, it was just really shocking. So I wasn't mad at him. This was like, oh, we are not aligned. We need to have some conversations. And this is when I broke down and I was like, hey, I'm not okay. Something's wrong. I'm not okay. And I had recently talked to somebody, a friend of mine who was a therapist, just kind of casually. She's like kind of a distant friend. And she was like, have you thought that maybe you might have postpartum depression? To which I was offended because I was like, how dare you? I am perfect. I have no mental health issues. I've never been depressed before. And she's not a mother. And so I was like, you don't know. How would you know?
Right.
But she has been depressed before. And there was a lot of similarities, except for mine is a bit harder because I have to also take care of a baby on top of that. I can't just sit there and sulk by myself. I was kind of mad, but then it's so interesting when you have that big of a response to something. It's like, okay, what are you rejecting so strongly? Like, what button did she push? So I thought about it and I was like, oh, and then that's when I went and started to see a therapist.
And the story with your husband, that happened after you started therapy or before you started therapy?
Before I started therapy. I needed to talk to him first. It's a combination. You kind of need a bit of a holistic team here, but he needed to know. So when I'm like, even after I talked to him, it's not like things got better. I just had support.
That's a very key point. I love how you just said that. That it's not necessarily about the getting better, but in order to get better, there has to be a team there. There has to be support in order for the better to actually happen. And
otherwise, how does the better?
That is so important. I hope people are hearing that point. It's sort of like, for some reason, I have this picture in my head of, let's say you have a natural disaster and people need to be lifted out of certain areas and they're not able to move themselves. It's not just one person that can move the body. You have to get a few hands under that body and then together say 1, 2, 3, and then pick up the body to get it to safety and to an ambulance. I think the same thing when we're going through pretty much anything, but here we're talking about the postpartum, that it's not just, I could deal with this on my own. No, there needs to be that realization, like you were saying, of, okay, I need help. I need to do something about this. And then you lay the groundwork. I guess you could say even before planting the seeds, you get the soil ready for the seeds to be planted. And I think that's exactly what you're talking about. So there you are, you have a small support system, your husband, some friends, a therapist. And what's the process from there regarding what you needed to do for yourself?
I had to be really honest. So if I started to feel sort of like an episode, as it were, labor come on, or like I was starting to feel really heavy and my body was starting to ache. Sometimes it would come off in the form of anxiety. So I'd start to feel really panicky and something bad is going to happen. And I would let Qasim know, like, Qasim is my husband. I'm experiencing, like, I'm not feeling okay. I need to be alone. Can I give you the baby? And I just fed him. He's fine. Like, just play with him or go give him a bath. And I would go and I would do whatever it was that I needed to do because I was still in this space of needing to disassociate as my coping mechanism. I would go into our room and I'd watch like Third Rock from the Sun or something. I really liked watching comedy. It was just fun. And, I'm one of those people that in dark times, I just want to laugh. If I'm sick, I'll pull up stand-up comedy and watch stand-up comedy in bed if I'm sick. It's just what I like. I would sort of do that until like the episodes passed. I'm not saying that that's the correct thing to do. I'm just saying that that's what I did.
But I think everyone has to find their own thing. And it's okay for not to be the first thing that you turn to YouTube or the TV to. I mean, it could be something else. And there is no right way for finding the thing that works for you. But I think it's that recognizing that, okay, I have to give up the baby right now for a few minutes or half hour. And you take that mindset is, I think, key to any sort of change we want to make. And I guess, in my room, we would call it awareness aspect of things. And it's the awareness that breeds any sort of change that we want to have. When there are times where it gets that awareness is a little bit harder based on whatever situation it is. Let's say Mondays are a lot harder than Saturdays to find that awareness. What would you recommend a person could do to sort of assist with that opening up for the concept of awareness to be easierly found, if that's a word, easierly?
I think a lot of it is giving grace for yourself. I think we put too much on ourselves in terms of, like, I think about now, if my kid came to me and he was like, I'm so sad, something happened, I wouldn't be like, you're fine, get over it, brush it off. But we talk to ourselves that way. This is where IFS really comes in. We talk to ourselves in ways that I know for a fact you would not talk to your children. I think there requires just moments of grace where you're like, okay, I know this is going to be really hard and that's going to be okay. And I just need to get through it. And again, like, the depression is lying to you. This doesn't mean that this is how you're going to continually feel for the rest of your life, or maybe even for the rest of the day. But these few moments are going to be hard. And as Glennon Doyle likes to say, we can do hard things.
I love it.
I think it's just giving yourself grace to, like, human beings are always seeking pleasure and avoiding pain. That's just that's what we do, right? I think there's moments where you have to be like, this is going to be painful. There's nothing I can do about it in this moment, if that is the situation that you're in, and just sort of being okay with that and not trying to so desperately avoid it.
So a few things of that. I guess, there happens to be a slogan that I have hanging in my office saying, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with realizing that there is a place that I could experience this hard or bad feeling. That's okay. What am I doing about it? It's not that, or as IFS says, there are no bad parts. And every single part that we experience, there's a reason for it. It could be that border, that big wall of China that we've put up to not have any feelings go inside, to not allow people to say anything to me like, oh, maybe you should see someone. Me? I should see someone? Do you know what I've been through? I think in some ways we've all experienced that concept of wanting to take care of everything ourselves. And like you're saying, one of the ways to get to place of healing is realizing that there are steps even before planting the seeds, and we have to open up ourselves in order for the seeds to be planted. And I guess in the trauma world, the way it's talked about a lot, from Pia Mellody to Bessel van der Kolk, Frank Anderson, they talk about this concept of the same way the things that have happened to us, whether it's the neglect, the trauma, the abuse, has been because or through attachments and relationships to others. That's the same way we're going to heal. And it's through all those relationships, not necessarily the same all the time, but it's through relationships and through support of others and that realization and acknowledgement of needing people that we get.
That's so hard. That's so hard. When you are depressed, you do not want people, and you kind of think all people are horrible and they don't understand you, et cetera. So to be like, oh, I need people, I need to reach out. Where's my village? It's a really hard thing to accept.
Yeah. And I don't think it's even binary for where you might find that help. There's a plethora of different places and ways for people to look for that. And it sounds like there's been a lot of your journey that has been finding or even realizing that there's a place out there to find that help. What would you recommend to people that are, I guess you could say, in the pre-contemplation stages of finding help? Where can they look to start the process of working on their postpartum depression?
Well, first of all, I hate that this question has to be asked, because this is what happens now. Right now, you have a baby, you're in shock, you experience postpartum depression, or lost because you have a baby and it's super hard. And then if you're having depression, you have to, first of all, be aware enough to be like, I think I'm depressed. Oh, I think I should go ask for help. Oh, now I have to go find the strength to ask for help. Oh, now I have to go find the help. Where is it? Whereas,
oh, and I have to go ahead and take care of this baby.
Oh yeah, I forgot about the baby.
Forgot about that.
Side note. What I wish was that we were so bombarded with resources and help that I'm almost like, hey, I'm claustrophobic. I need you to go away, push you away now. But I would rather that. And then if I don't need it, I can be like, hey, I'm great. Thank God everything turned out fine. I don't have postpartum depression. Off you go to the next person. But instead, I have to take and the zero willpower I have and I have to go out and seek it. Are you kidding me? That's so not right. We are not supporting moms in the way that they need to be supported.
100%.
We're not supporting moms' emotional needs.
Yes.
And that's really frustrating because how are we supposed to support our children's emotional needs? I think about Sammy's first year. And when I talk about it, it makes me want to cry because I was so messed up and I could not meet his emotional needs. And he would cry all the time and I would blame him. And then in hindsight, I was like, oh, he's feeding off of my energy. I'm a wreck. So he's a wreck. And then when he would be a wreck, I would be a wreck. And it was just this terrible, terrible cycle. And I couldn't do it. And there's a lot of guilt now in hindsight of like the time that I lost with my first child, you know, that should have been this like really beautiful time. And it's not my fault, but what I feel is like, oh, I squandered it. It was ruined and all these things.
I want to point out to people what you just said, that it's not my fault. That wasn't something that was easy to say. I don't know you that well enough to say that, yeah, you could do that off the top of your head. But I want to point out to everyone listening, those words that Susie just said shows the work that she's done in order to say those words. Because for someone to say this blame is not mine, but it's something that I'm dealing with and I need to work on it, which is something that you've done, which is why you're here talking about it, I think is something that all mothers, hopefully, that are experiencing any form of postpartum depression can say one day. But I want to go back to that question. So where can we look for help? And just something that was popping through my head as you were just talking very, very passionately and very, very truthfully. This would be one of the places for, I guess you could say, my answer for there's so much social media out there. Like, why does there so much? How do we sort of bring it under a little more restriction? And at the same time, if let's say some places where sometimes moms go would be to just scroll on their phone and they're looking at reels, they're looking at posts and stuff, and they see a post on social media of someone struggling with depression, all it takes is one person to go one little thumbprint click, a little more of an inch up from instead of scrolling down, clicking on something, and you have your answer for a place for a person to go. And I guess you could see would be one of my, I guess you could say, reasons for the social media being a good thing would be, hey, maybe there is some help out there that people can find. And it just takes one person to click on one TikTok for there to be another person helped, hopefully. So that would be one of the things I would say.
Yeah, I can't believe how many people have actually gotten help from places like TikTok because they're like, I don't use TikTok, I use Instagram, but they're like, oh, I feel seen. Like I have somebody on the opposite side of the world who explained everything that's going on in my head with my ADHD, with my autism, with my postpartum depression, with whatever it is. And they just feel heard. And so much of what I think moms need to begin with is needing to feel like they are seen and us to be able to look at them and be like, what you're doing is really, really hard. I'm so sorry that this is harder than it should be to begin with. It was already going to be hard. And I'm so sorry that it's harder for you, instead of invalidating and being dismissive and things like that. So for example, I asked a mom once, she's a family friend. I go, how are you? She's a 4-month-old. And she's like, oh, I'm good. And I'm like, no. And then I kind of like zeroed in on her. And I'm like, how are you? And she was like, well, I'm actually going through. And then she sort of like started talking more openly instead of like, oh, I'm good. How are you? What's up? How are the kids? And I was like really trying to see her. And then later she texted me and she was like, you're the first person that genuinely asked me how I am since I had the baby and like genuinely want to know. And that really got me thinking that I'm actually not okay. And here's the things that I'm doing. I'm asking my partner to take on more at home. He works, which is fine, but then he comes home and he does nothing. But I'm on the clock all day. So I asked him to take on more at home. I let him know that I need breaks. I read your book. She hadn't read it yet, which I was like, you're my friend. So she read my book and it made her feel seen and heard. And that kind of gave her the strength, first of all, to know that it doesn't last forever, that it is sort of a temporary postpartum state of depression. It's the way I like to word it. So there's things like that where therapy is my favorite. I'm not a fan of taking meds That's just my own personal thing. Therapy is my favorite. But the hard thing about therapy is it's like dating. It's just, except it's way more expensive. How many therapists did I go through before I found the one who I'm like, please adopt me. You're amazing. Be in my life.
I know.
Forever.
I talk about it. And I guess some of my intros that I have, or the first session that I'm having with someone, therapy is like finding a house, a spouse, or a pair of shoes. And sometimes you have to try on a few to find the one that works for you. And that's okay. There is nothing wrong with that. And you're right. It's very much like finding the thing that works for you. And you have to play matchmaker. And there are many sites out there where you can find the therapist that works for you. And they're not all correct. It's about really finding that person that works for you. Besides with therapy and maybe going into the right places on social media, are there other things that you could recommend that one day we can be bombarded with when it comes to new moms or even not new moms finding help for their postpartum?
There are really good books. My favorite author, who also runs something called the Postpartum Stress Center, her name's Karen Kleinman. And she wrote a book, I can't remember what it's called, like Moms Have Scary Thoughts Too, or something like that.
That sounds very
and
familiar.
She kind of like lays, it's an older book. It's got to be like 25 years old or something. She's been around for a while. She's brilliant. And she also trains clinicians, because there's so many clinicians who don't know how to treat this particular arm of depression.
Yes,
it's very unique.
Specific.
There's things like that. My favorite one that isn't like, how do you go and get help? But it's like, what can you just do for yourself right now? That I felt was really, really useful is that I do not believe it is possible to recharge at the end of a day. That's not a thing for me. And for most of the women that I've talked to, you're working all day, you're with the baby, you're exhausted. At nighttime, you just want to pass out if you're lucky enough to sleep. Right. What I recommend daily to get yourself through are small moments in the middle of the day. I learned this when I got to my second one. So during nap time, with my first one, I'm like, okay, I can clean, I can take a shower, I can prep dinner, I can, whatever. With my second one, I was like, nope. Where's my book? Where's my coffee? Which, by the way, in hindsight, I'm like, oh, I just gave myself a cup of anxiety every single day in the middle of my anxiety attacks. Cool. But I would read my book and I would drink my coffee and I would sit there during his nap time. Sammy was at school. Ronan was taking a nap. And I had like an hour and a half to myself, maybe 2 if I was lucky. And I got to recharge.
That's beautiful.
And that gave me, honestly, when I started doing that, my panic attacks went away. That's when my panic attacks went away. I have a line of delineation that I can see, because I got time to myself and I used it for me, not for the house, not for the kids. I used it for me. I was excited to go pick up Sammy from school at that point. I was excited to see Ronan after his nap, because I was just sort of filling my cup. But I don't think you can fill your cup at the end of the day. I don't think you can fill your cup by saying to your wife, hey, honey, go visit your sister in 3 months. Here, I bought you a ticket. Okay, what's she going to do between now and 3 months? That's nice, but she needs daily care, especially in that time. So for me, it was giving that to myself and just being like, I'm not doing anything, nothing else matters, was just a way for me to cope daily, because you aren't seeing your therapist every day. And there are days where your husband isn't around to support you. You have to be able to do that for yourself.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it doesn't have to be the hour and a half, 2 hours. And some moms, unfortunately, don't get the opportunity to have that long of a time. But it could be 15, 20 minutes, a half hour of picking up that book. I love how you said no technology during that time. I think that's very much a part of that recharge as much as we can. And also, we have lives. And if there are certain things from work or other things that need to get taken care of, you need to pick up your phone, that's okay too. The point that I think you're trying to say is specifically about doing things for you, which essentially will also mean doing things for the family because of you doing things for you. But it has to be in that order first. You doing you in order to do everything else, which I think is the point that you're saying. And I think there's a plethora of ways. You have to find the way and the thing that works for you. I mean, I guess in the therapy world, we call it being mindful and meditating over whatever it is you need to meditate with in order to get to the place of you having that fulfillment of self. I think it's also important to point out that could look different every day. And it's not necessarily the same thing to say, oh, well, I'm going to read this book every single day when Rona goes down for a nap. It could be something a little different. It could be a shower. It could be just doing nothing, going outside, getting some sun, or closing your eyes for a few minutes. Whatever it is that, you feel, I think that's in some ways, and maybe for certain people, that could be even more therapeutic than therapy and more necessary than therapy. Everyone has to sort of see what works for them. But, we started this thing about that being curious aspect. I think everyone has to be curious within self and know what's happening, know what's happening inside. And that's where we get to a place of any sort of growth and change is through first going inside. I like saying, like, make a U-turn, like using your hand to sort of make a U-turn and go back to self, and then sort of go from there. Because once you can make the U-turn, then you can go in the right direction. And I think that's basically what it is that you're saying over here. Are there other points? And obviously there's, I think, so much more just regarding the book, which we're going to have a link to in the show notes. Are there other points based on your experience that you feel are essential for moms that are going through this to know?
I felt like the ideal mother was a lie. Obviously, it's a lie, but here's where I saw the lie. Is when we say mothers are goddesses, that's true, but that's not what we mean. What we mean is mothers are the Virgin Mary, because we just see women, mothers, as this like pious, beautiful, like, look at what she did when Jesus died. Like, she just like was there, and she was so like sweet and crying, and she was so holy, and like all these things, right? So she's perfect. She's the perfect mother. You just told us that we're goddesses. What does that mean? What are goddesses? Goddesses were fierce, and they were pissy, and they were emotional, and they were jealous, and they were happy, and they were sexy, and they were beautiful, and they were like all these things. But you don't want us to be all those things. You want us to be the Virgin Mary. But you're telling us we're goddesses. Like, get it straight. We are all those things. And I think one of the really important things for me that I was learning is like, I get to be all those things. And it's not as a preconceived idea of what motherhood is supposed to look like based on how my mother and my aunts did it, or how people here do it, or whatever it is.
Or people on social media that have the perfect lives and kids do it.
Yeah, those people. I remember even like going to there was this mom place, and everybody had like their hair and nails done. They had like their hair was blown out, and they had pedicures. And I was like, when did you find the time to do this? Is this what moms are supposed to be? Am I not adulting right? I couldn't figure it out, but it's because I was asking for other people's permission to tell me how I was supposed to behave, instead of just saying, this is who I want to be. And I think so much of it is kind of taking ownership over who you are and who you want to be. And to your point, being super mindful over who that is. And I don't think any of us spend a lot of time going inward until we are in a place of devastation. And then you start to think, okay, how did I get here? So it's a really hard place to start. But this is, to your point, how we grow. And so much of it has to do with just allowing yourself to really be who you are and giving yourself that grace.
Yeah, and having a really good support system, like you were saying. I know there are so many more things that we can talk about on this topic, but as we're running out of time over here, I have 3 questions I like asking everyone as we're sort of wrapping things up over here. So my first question to you is, if you had a superpower, but a mundane, everyday superpower as a mom, what would you want to take?
A mundane, everyday superpower? Oh, just the power to levitate stuff. Like, I don't have to go and get things from the other side of the house. I could just just Accio, bring it to me. Yeah.
There we go. I was about to say, use the Accio.
Yeah.
There we go. Okay. How about a book? I know we talked about a book earlier that you found helpful, and the actual title of the book that you were talking about before is Good Moms Have Scary Thoughts, a healing guide to the secret fears of new mothers, from Karen Kleinman. And it is a phenomenal book and highly recommended. And we'll try to put a link for that in the show notes as well. But is there a book that you would recommend that you found helpful, not from the parenting perspective, but from the personal perspective for what you went through and in postpartum?
Yes, it's a bit more holistic, but the body keeps the score. You smile, you know.
She was not paid to say that, just for everyone listening to this podcast. People know that I consider him a mentor and has a chance to speak to him quite a few times. Him? So I've had an opportunity to speak to him. So yeah.
Oh my God.
I would highly recommend that book as well. And we will put a link into the show notes for Bessel van der Kolk's Holy Grail of books for all of us to be reading. So
it is the Holy Grail. I tell people this, if you could just read one book about mental health, there you go. That's it. And then you're fine.
Yeah. Okay. And my last question for you, if you can think of a funny or embarrassing story that happened to you as a parent, what would that be?
Oh my God. I wish I knew before, because I cannot think. What happened to me that's funny or embarrassing?
When you look back at it now, seems funny and embarrassing.
Yeah, I'm sure at the time I was horrified, whatever it was. I'm going to have to leave you a voice note and send it to you later. Am I blocking this out? Is this me disassociating? Am I trying not to remember?
Or maybe it's all that trauma that has made it that it's hidden, all those memories.
I'll have to go back and read the body keeps the score again.
Okay, so maybe we'll have to come back to that one. Yeah, and you'll send us a voice.
Sorry, I can't think of anything.
Okay, well, it's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you so much for sharing this. And I hope this is a topic that we can all get bombarded by in the way where we don't have to seek the help and it's there right in front of us. Thank you so much today for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you so much.